you just said where you live, your place of residence, and where you do your business, you operate your business. That's what matters, not where you file the LLC. Salim Omar here from Straight Talk CPAs. Welcome, and I'm joined today by my senior tax advisor, Sabir. Sabir, welcome.
Hi, Salim. Thank you for having me.
So, one of the questions that we hear a lot is, should I form a Wyoming or a Delaware LLC? Will it save me taxes? What's your take on that?
So there are a lot of chatters around this topic, but I would say the one of the biggest myth right now is so people think that if you open an LLC in Wyoming or Delaware, so you will not have to pay state taxes, right? So I mean, first it sounds attractive because it has low fees, low annual fees, and no state income tax in these states. Right? It also provides a privacy. But the reality is, forming an LLC in Wyoming or Delaware, it does not automatically reduce your state taxes.
And this confusion, I mean, we see it's costing business owners money. They think that where the LLC is formed determines the tax. And in most cases, that isn't the case.
No. So, what actually determines your tax liability is where you live and where you operate your business, not just where you have filed the formation document or incorporated your LLC.
So you just said where you live, your place of residence, and where you do your business, you operate your business. That's what matters, not where you file the LLC, Delaware, Wyoming. Uh, so if you live in California, as an example, you run your business from California, you serve your customers, clients from California, you're going to owe California taxes. So it doesn't matter if your LLC paperwork was filed in Wyoming or any other state tax-free state.
So there is a technical term for this. It is called nexus. So in a layman's term, you can say it is called a connection with the state. So if your business has what's called a nexus, meaning if you have a physical presence in that state, whether it be through your office, your factory, or you have employees or inventory or an active operations in a state, so that state has a right to tax the income generated there. So if you form an LLC in Delaware or Wyoming, but operates your business in California, you will likely need to register as a foreign LLC in California because you have a nexus there and you need to comply with the California state rules.
That's not good because now you have two states involved. The formation state, in your case, the example you gave in Wyoming, so you got to comply with that. And then you have to comply with California as well. So it's increasing compliance, not reducing, more paperwork, more things to track, track. And of course, that can lead to more expenses and stress.
Yeah. So often people hear that Wyoming has no state income tax, right? So that is true. But they assume that it means there is no tax for them as well. So that is not the case, right? So forming an LLC in these states only benefits you if you actually live in that state, let's say in a Wyoming or a Delaware, and you actually operate there. So basically, you have a nexus there in Wyoming and Delaware. So then only it make sense to incorporate LLCs there. But if you live in a high tax state and you form an LLC in a no tax state, so it will not eliminate your taxes from your home state obligations.
So states, what they care about is economic activity. You mentioned nexus, that physical connection. They don't care for what your mailing address is. So this is the reason, I guess, why big companies often use these states like Wyoming or Delaware, right?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, like why the big corporations form in this state, right? So let's take an example of Delaware. So that state is popular for a different reason. One of them is corporate law. So Delaware has very well developed court of chancery and a strong legal infrastructure. That's why large corporations prefer that state. So basically, when we say court of chancery, it is nothing but a separate dedicated courts for the businesses and fiduciaries. So it is a no jury tax courts. So it is decided by the professionals, very well developed case laws and everything there. So that is the reason the big companies like Apple and Walmart are incorporated there. So, but that's about legal predictability and investor preference, not a personal tax saving for a small business owner.
So for the small and medium-sized businesses, whatever industry you are in, consultants, contractors, online businesses, retail, restaurants, and so forth, one of these states rarely provides any tax advantages, be it Delaware or be it Wyoming, and I think there's several other states where there is no state income tax. If anything, it just often adds annual franchise taxes and extra filings.
Yep, exactly. Because and there are legitimate reasons to form in another states. So some of them are asset protection, or you want to raise a venture capital, or you have a multi-state operations. Because once you have an operation in another state, now you need to follow the rules of that state, and you need to register as a foreign LLC, or there is an investor requirement, right? So there are a lot of legitimate reasons to form LLC in another state, but saving income tax while living elsewhere is not one of them.
Hmm. And most small and medium-sized businesses, with exceptions, don't fall in this in the realm of needing, they're not raising venture capital or investments, or maybe they don't have multi-state operations. Larger companies, they do. It favors them to do it. But the small business owner, they're doing it more from the perspective of, oh, I heard Wyoming is going to save me money, and so they're forming there, but it's not for the right, it's not for the right reasons. So is there a way for a small and medium-sized business to save money on taxes?
Yeah, I mean, if your goal is to reduce taxes, so there are not only one factors people need to look at as an holistic view, right? So they need a proper entity election, like S corp election, to save some taxes on self-employment tax. Then they need to structure the reasonable salary. They also need to look at the retirement contributions, accountable plans, and the state residency planning as well, right? So there are a lot of factors to consider, and there is no like one particular thing that reduces your taxes. So those are real strategies. Simply picking these states like Wyoming as a formation state, it will not reduce the tax implications.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, tax planning is about structure, operations. It's being proactive versus being reactive, being deadline driven versus being tax strategy driven versus deadline driven. So it's looking at taxes as a whole and identifying the right opportunities for that business. But for most small and medium-sized businesses, forming in another state is not the solution. So before forming an entity, starting a new business, expanding your operations by creating another company, understand that that's not one of the things that really, for most folks, it's going to be beneficial to save money on taxes. It usually doesn't work the way you think or what you may be reading online.
Yeah, so as you said, that it needs to be looked at from an holistic standpoint, a bigger picture planning and analysis. So if you are considering forming out of state, you need to run the numbers and understand the compliance requirement first, but also need to see how these fits into your overall vision and goals for growth, future growth.
Yeah, that's great. Sabir, thanks for taking the time. For the viewer, hope you got value from this video. If you liked it, feel free to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll continue sharing more of this type of knowledge and education. Thanks.